Welcome to Three Translators of Pop Culture. This is going to be the order of events today. Quick welcome now. Then our moderator, Christy Fernandez, will be interviewing each of the three speakers. Emily Balistreri, Pete Stephen, Paul, and Molly Rabbit, 20 minutes. After that, we'll move to a question and answer session for all three of the speakers. And then there are a couple of announcements at the end. Thank you, Christy.
Well, thank you for the introduction. But yeah, so hello, everyone. And thank you so much for coming to this SWET Talk. So as Louise just mentioned, today I'll be interviewing three incredible translators who work on manga, light novels, and anime subtitles. So sit back and relax because it's sure to be interesting interview and a whole lot of fun, I imagine. The translator I'll be interviewing after Emily is Stephen Paul. Stephen's been a translator of comics and novels since 2004. His credits include manga series such as One Piece, Battle Angel Alita, and Vinland Saga, and also the light novel series Sword Art Online, and also many, many other titles. Let's move on to our next interviewee. Hi, Stephen. Are you ready to get started? Hello.
I am.
So, in your case now, would you mind getting into your, anime origin story? Basically, how did you get into learning Japanese and then translating all that?
I started studying in middle school in the mid-90s, and at the time I didn't really know much about, I knew that, back then they called it Japanimation. That was the vogue word. And I knew of it, but I didn't know much about manga. It was more of like an elective that I could take that wasn't Spanish or French. And so I basically had the option to keep taking it and slowly got interested in reading manga, and I bought the English books that were coming out at the time from Viz back in the late 90s. And it wasn't really I never really connected the two possibilities in my head that this could actually be something I could do with my skill until I learned, I live in Southern California, I learned that 15 minutes away, there was a Japanese supermarket that was leasing out part of their space to a Japanese bookstore. And so I bought some manga that I already owned in English that I could do a side-by-side. I think that was Inuyasha. And then I bought a book that that was not available in English at the time, which was Detective Conan. And so I decided, you know what, I'm going to try to go through this with my dictionary and see how much I can understand, because that's the only way I'm going to be able to read this book. And it's funny because that actually, in retrospect, I think was a good choice to do. I think I alarmed my Japanese teacher because all of a sudden I knew words like Satsujin Jiken and Higaisha and vocabulary words that second year students are not supposed to know. But in terms of the dialogue itself, it's very kind of rigorously logical, and it helped me develop, I think, a solid understanding of just how sentences are constructed, because there isn't a lot of room for slang or character when the dialogue is like, well, if the suspect had to jump 5 meters from one balcony to another, things like that have to be laid out very clearly in the text. And so I think I learned a lot from doing that. But I started a fan site for it. And that was the kind of the thing you did back then, when everybody was on dial-up, is you had a fan site and you put your translation there as a text script. So if somebody had the book, they could follow along with it. And there were other sites that did that too. And how this ended up turning into a job was, I pretty much owe my whole career to one person who I knew. His name is Alexi Kirsch, and he is currently, I think he's the associate editor-in-chief of the Shonen Jump line for Viz. And he used to run a fan site for Naruto, and I think maybe Hikaru no Go, some other old Jump series. and he ended up getting a job with Tokyo Pop in the early 2000s. And he just out of the blue emailed me and said, "Hey, do you want a job? We got some books coming in that I already know that you're a fan of. So, do you want to work on this?" And, I had just assumed that it was going to be something that I would have to do, the legitimate way to complete college, get a degree, apply, just kind of cold, just send them resumes and things. And so it was this very unexpected opportunity. But that is kind of one of the features of this industry, is that it's very much, if you know somebody, and all they really care about is if you can do the job or not. And by that point, I had been practicing on my own for enough years that I was, I passed the test for them.
Wow, that's quite a story. Awesome. So, so at the time you were doing your fan translation site, I was kind of wondering, did you get a lot of feedback? Like, were on that site, like, I'm assuming that a lot of people would put up fan translations perhaps, and then like, I'm kind of wondering, yeah, just about the feedback, and if there was any that like was really helpful. Was it really like editing each other's thing or checking the translations? Like, was there any sort of that stuff involved?
Not so much. I definitely remember having, sometimes you would get, an email out of the blue from someone who wanted to offer notes or something. But I think really, 99% of it was just like going by trial and error. Just, you don't know what this is at first, so you just kind of guess, or you make an educated guess, and eventually you'll see the same word or the same type of sentence, used in a slightly different context. And then that, you begin to develop a three-dimensional understanding of what all of these words and how the language works. And, then you go back a few years later and you look at the old stuff and you're like, oh, I can see that, half of this was wrong, but now I can recognize that is what the correct answer is for these things. So it was, I would say it was 99% just kind of learning as I went along.
Wow. So that was your main way that you personally honed your translation skills, was just trial and error.
Yeah, I was, manga was kind of, I was a one-trick pony working with manga. And then about, I think 2014, maybe it's 2012. Around then was when Yen Press started doing their light novel line. And I had not worked on novels before, but they asked me if I wanted to branch out to that. And so I started working on those, and now I'm a two-trick pony. So that's just kind of how, you just learn. Every medium is very different, and has its own set of tricks to learn. And that's basically how it goes.
Wonderful. So about how long do you say it took you to break into the industry? Because I know you said, like, at the time when that your mentor, I guess, or the person who really helped you get into the industry, took you on, you had already been translating for years at that point. So about how many years do you think you had been translating?
Let's see. I believe I started my my Detective Conan experiment was around 1999, and it was 2004 when I got hired to work with Tokyo Pop.
Wow.
So yeah, it was several years.
Wow. So I'm also definitely seeing a theme here with self-motivation, whether it's going to a bookstore and just being like, you know what, I'm going to try this, or, Emily's similar story of just making a sample book. The self-motivation thing seems to be super duper important. Moving on to One Piece and your translation stuff with that. So you're not only the translator of the One Piece manga, of course, but also a big One Piece fan and the member of that One Piece podcast. So I was wondering, how does it feel to translate one of your favorite manga professionally? And also, how does it feel like interacting with fans of the series on the podcast?
It's it's something I definitely have to be very careful not to take for granted, because I've been very fortunate, I think, to work on a lot of like sort of dream series for me. One of the very first things that I ever got hired to work on was a series that I was a huge fan of, which was a music manga called Beck. And so, you know, it was like, you know, I couldn't imagine a better start. And One Piece was another thing that I got my, you know, helped cut my teeth working, you know, learning how to translate by muddling through it myself for years, even before it was published in English. And that too was something that Alexi, you know, after Tokyopop, he ended up getting a job at Viz and working on, you know, Naruto and being an editor for their series. And he became the editor for One Piece. And they brought me in to work on that in 2012 when they switched their publication format. They were starting a weekly digital magazine for Shonen Jump. And the change in the publishing schedule and the, you know, the conditions of how they were going to be producing it, you know, I think he thought that was a good chance to bring in somebody new. And so I think his excuse was like, okay, well, you're a super fan, right? So you know what you're doing. I don't have to like work as hard to double check your stuff. So, you know, that was his self-deprecating answer. But that was kind of how I got in on that. And, you know, it's a very singular series. You know, it's broken every record you could imagine. So, you know, it's not the pressure isn't just that, you know, that it's something that I love, but also something that is incredibly popular. And so I always have to, you know, kind of pinch myself and yeah, you know, ground myself when I'm thinking about how, you know, that I actually work on it. But yeah, I do. I am also a regular member on a weekly podcast dedicated to One Piece, and so I do get to talk and sometimes you know, go into translation choices and things like that related to the series or whatever you know, was in the latest weekly chapter.
What is it like interacting with the fans? Is it largely positive? Like, what is that dynamic? Yeah.
It's interesting. I think the Viz's edition of One Piece has some, you know, they've been publishing it for a long time, and there are certain artifacts of the localization that are by and large not popular with the fans. And so, you know, I'm used to the idea that like not everyone is immediately on board with the thing, even if there were, you know, decisions that I had no part in making. But you know, it's certainly a kind of it's a pressure cooker kind of thing, in that you get used to the idea of being criticized. And so, you know, it helps kind of toughen you up a little bit to be able to stick up for, you know, choices that you make, and so on. But largely, I think the fans are very cool. And you know, there's I do feel like I I have a mini following as well. Or I know that there are people out there that really enjoy my stretch of work on it. So I appreciate that as well.
Wow. So yeah, it sounds like you've built up quite the defense, or the what I forgot the word you just used, but you seem pretty not affected, but you're like, no, I made these decisions.
Yeah. You have to learn how to stick up for your ideas.
Very cool. So, all right. So, looking back on your translation of One Piece and other works and things, because you've been doing this, you know, for the past 15 plus years, I think, you know, translating professionally. Do you feel that your process has changed over time, and in what way? You know?
I guess that depends on how you define process, but I don't know. I think, you know, to me, the thing that I look back on and realize is just kind of the savvy to like, if you're especially working on serialized manga that you are, you know, you're kind of working on without a safety net below. You don't know what's going to happen next. You don't know how certain choices might have a, you know, an undesired effect down the line. And so I think doing that for a while, you kind of learn, you get hunches about
Mhm.
like where you have to play it safe and where the pitfalls may lie. And, you know, when a character who is not seen, you know, may have a like a gender surprise when you actually see who they are. So learning to sense things like that ahead of time and to be able to, you know, leave yourself leeway to deal with them as they come up is that's something that I definitely learned over time with a lot of experience.
Yeah, I've definitely have that experience too, just being like, oh, this person doesn't, you know, everyone just refers to them by their name, never any pronoun in any, okay,
Right.
I gotta be really careful here, you know,
Mhm.
things like that. Oh, very good. So besides One Piece, what are you currently working on?
Oh man, lots of lots of stuff. I do the Sword Art Online series of novels and anything related to that. I unfortunately I can't say what it hasn't been announced yet. The novel that I'm currently working on, which is kind of a break from that series. But I did do a book recently that was really fun for Yen Press called 3 Days of Happiness, which was I guess it would be technically a light novel, although there aren't any illustrations. And that is a bit of a drama about a guy who um, stumbles across a mysterious business that will buy your lifespan, and he is very cynical and tired of life and decides to sell all but 30 days of his life. And there's a bit of not to puff it up too much or to make too big of a comparison, but there's definitely some Osamu Dazai in the main character being very just dead inside, and that was really interesting and very different from the usual light novel thing. So that was pretty cool to work on. I think that's coming out later this year, maybe.
Any other future projects you can talk about while you're on the topic, or are
Uh,
those?
no, I don't. Not much that new that's coming up. I think just a lot of the same old stuff.
No worries. I also wanted to know, what does a typical day in the life of Stephen look like when, you know, you have a translation that you're working on? Or, I mean, does
Yeah.
it change a lot every day, or what is that like?
No, I mean, I wish that Emily had more advice about work-life balance too, because I totally understand that. I tend to work pretty much all day. It's not, again, also not 100% focused all the time, but it does tend to stretch through most of the waking hours of the day, where I'm taking breaks here and there and going back to it. But I'm usually splitting my time between light novels and manga because I have my schedules are always overlapping,
Mm.
so there's a lot of bouncing back and forth. That's
So
what I
there's
would
no
say.
like rigid schedule. You're just like, oh, I gotta do some of this, then some of that.
Yeah, it's pretty much like, okay, I want to do at least 10 novel pages per day. If I'm just focusing on that, I'm usually trying to hit 20.
Mhm.
But if it's 10, then I'm usually, squashing in a certain amount of manga as well. And then there are weekly chapters and monthly chapters and other ongoing things that pop up now and then. So yeah, it's usually just like, okay, what am I going to work on today? Oh boy, let's take a look. That's kind of how it starts.
So no tips on how not to burn out, I guess, as a freelance
Mm.
translator.
No, you have to love it, and you have to be okay with not having much of a social life, which is, I mean, in 2020 it turns out that worked in my favor, I guess. But it's uh yeah, it's a lonely existence.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree. Um, but also to the aspiring or new translators here, do you have any advice for them? So far, we have from Emily to study grammar. Do you have
Mm.
any thing to add to that? Yeah.
In my experience, I would say to add to that would be that you like, especially if you need to learn how, just learning Japanese in general it is kind of self-motivation based. You need to have something that will keep your interest and keep you coming back to it. And like, you know, when you hit a wall, that it's something that will interest you enough to keep going and keep struggling around it, and know that, you know, you'll get there eventually. That is a huge thing in my opinion. And as far as like the industry itself it's good to know people. I think networking is a huge, I mean, it's true of just about any industry, but it is definitely true here too. That if you are around on social media and you know, follow the people who you know, are in the industry, and you know, communicate with them or interact with them, like that's also you know, a decent way to do that. I got Caleb Cook some of his first jobs, and he's the translator of My Hero Academia and Dr. Stone, and you know, he's gone on to do great things as well. So sometimes it's just about who, you know, like getting that foot in the door, getting someone to tie you to you know, a managing editor, so that they can email you back and you know, to get vouched for, stuff like that. That's how it works pretty much.
Fantastic. So that again, our 20 minutes are up. Thank you so much. That was super interesting, Stephen. So it looks like we're on to our last